They brought her in chains. Neve walked between two guards, her wrists bound in iron, her head held high despite everything. The throne room stretched before her, vast and cold, filled with wolves who watched her procession with hungry eyes. At the far end, on a throne carved from black stone, sat the Lichen King. She didn't look at him. Not yet. If she looked at him, she might break. "Your Majesty." Her father's voice rang through the hall, oily with false deference. Alpha Mercer dropped to one knee, dragging Neve's brother down with him. "We come to offer our deepest apologies for the misunderstanding at the border." Misunderstanding? Neve nearly laughed. Her brother had killed 3 of the king's wolves in a drunken rage, had started a conflict that threatened to become a war. And now here she was, the payment for his sins. "The Mercer Pack takes full responsibility," her father continued. "And as a gesture of our sincere remorse, we offer you our daughter, to do with as you see fit." The words hit her like stones, even though she'd known they were coming. She was the apology, the sacrifice, the pretty thing they threw at the king's feet and hoped would distract him from demanding real justice. Her brother, the one who had actually committed the crime, knelt beside their father, head bowed in false penitence. He would walk free. She would pay his price. That was how it had always been. "Approach." The king's voice cut through the hall, deep, commanding. It resonated in Neve's chest like the toll of a funeral bell. The guards shoved her forward. She stumbled, caught herself, and lifted her chin. If she was going to be humiliated, she would face it with dignity. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only made things worse. She stopped at the base of the throne and finally raised her eyes. The Lichen King was not what she'd expected. The stories painted him as a monster, ancient, brutal, more beast than man. But the figure on the throne appeared no older than 30, with sharp features and dark hair that fell past his collar. He wore simple black clothing, no crown, no jewels. Nothing to mark him as royalty except the absolute authority that radiated from him like heat from a flame. And his eyes, amber and gold, burning with an intensity that made her want to bare her throat in pure instinct. Those eyes swept over her. The chains, the bruises on her wrists where the iron had chafed, the defiant set of her jaw. Something flickered in his expression, there and gone before she could name it. "Your name," he said. "Neve, Your Majesty." Her voice came out steady, a small victory. "And you're the one who killed my wolves?" The question was directed at her, but it was her father who answered. "She is offered in her brother's place, Your Majesty. A fair trade. More than fair. She's young, beautiful, untouched. She'll serve however you—" "I wasn't speaking to you." The correction landed like a whip crack. Her father fell silent, his face flushing with suppressed rage. The king's attention returned to Neve. "Answer the question. Did you kill my wolves?" "No, Your Majesty." "Did you participate in the attack?" "No." "Were you even present at the border?" "No, Your Majesty. I was at home. I learned of the incident the same time everyone else did." She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "I had nothing to do with it. And yet here you are, in chains, offered as an apology for a crime you didn't commit." The king's voice was deceptively soft. "Tell me, Neve, do you think that's fair? It was a trap. It had to be a trap." If she said no, she was criticizing her father's decision. If she said yes, she was accepting a punishment she didn't deserve. She chose truth. No, Your Majesty. I don't think it's fair. Silence. Her father made a strangled sound of outrage. Her brother's head snapped up, eyes wide with shock that she would dare speak against them. But the king smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted exactly what he was looking for. Neither do I. He rose from his throne and descended the steps until he stood before her. This close, she could feel the heat of him, could smell pine and winter air, and something wild underneath. Her wolf, quiet for so long she'd almost forgotten it existed, suddenly stirred. Mate, something whispered in the back of her mind. Mate, mate, mate. Impossible. She crushed the thought before it could take root. The king's mate would be someone powerful, someone worthy, not a sacrificial lamb in chains. Remove these, the king said, gesturing to her bound wrists. The guards hesitated. Your Majesty? Now. They scrambled to obey. The iron fell away, and Neve rubbed her raw wrists, trying to process what was happening. The king turned to face her father. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall. Let me make sure I understand the situation. Your son— He gestured to her brother without looking at him. Murdered 3 of my wolves in an unprovoked attack. And your idea of an apology is to offer me your daughter, who had nothing to do with it, as a— what? A gift? A distraction? A body to use however I see fit? Her father's face had gone pale. Your Majesty, it's tradition. When a pack cannot offer adequate compensation— She's not compensation. She's a person. The king's voice went cold, deadly. And you've treated her as less than nothing. I don't understand what you want from us. Her father's composure was cracking. We've offered everything we have, our most valuable— Your most valuable? The king laughed, but there was no humor in it. You offered her because she was expendable, because her life meant less to you than your son's, because you thought I would be so distracted by a pretty face that I'd forget about justice entirely. He turned back to Neve. His expression shifted, the ice thawing into something almost gentle. I'm not going to accept you as an apology, he said quietly, because you have nothing to apologize for. Neve's heart was pounding. I don't understand. You will. He raised his voice, addressing the hall. The Mercer Pack's apology is rejected. Their debt remains unpaid. Her father lurched to his feet. Your Majesty, please. However, the king's voice cut through the protest. I find myself in need of clarity. Before I decide on appropriate punishment, I want to understand exactly what kind of family offers an innocent woman in chains as payment for their son's crimes. He looked at Neve again, and something in his amber eyes made her breath catch. You'll stay here, he said, as my guest. Not my prisoner, not my property. My guest. And your family. His gaze swept to her father and brother, contempt dripping from every word. Will remain as well, until I'm satisfied that I understand the full scope of their values. Your Majesty. Her father's voice had gone shrill. Surely there's no need. There's every need. The king smiled again, and this time it was sharp as a blade. You brought your daughter here expecting me to punish her for your son's crimes. Instead, I'm going to do something far worse. What? The king's eyes never left Neve's face. I'm going to let her tell me the truth about your family. Every secret. Every cruelty. Every moment she's been treated as less than human. He reached out and touched her chin, tilting her face toward his. The contact sent fire racing through her veins. And then, Alpha Mercer, you're going to apologize. Not to me. To her. Her father made a sound like he was choking. Neve stared at the king, this man who had refused to accept her as payment, who had looked at her chains and felt rage instead of satisfaction, who was offering her something no one ever had. A voice. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" The king's thumb traced her cheekbone, achingly gentle. "Because you deserve someone who fights for you instead of against you," he said. "And because I think you've been waiting a very long time for someone to notice." He was right. She had been waiting. Her whole life, she'd been waiting for someone to see her as more than a bargaining chip, more than a problem to be solved, more than a body to be traded. And now, impossibly, someone had. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted. "I know." His amber eyes held hers, steady and sure. "But I'm going to give you every reason to try." The king's name was Raven. He told her as they walked through the castle corridors, her father and brother being escorted in the opposite direction by armed guards. The irony wasn't lost on Neve. She'd arrived in chains, and now they were the ones under watch. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "To your chambers." His voice was calm, unhurried. "You'll want to rest, and those wrists need tending." Neve looked down at the raw skin where the iron had bitten. She'd almost forgotten about the pain. After 23 years in her family's house, she'd learned to ignore a lot of things. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Whatever point you're trying to make with my father, you've made it. You can send me back with them. I won't cause any trouble." Raven stopped walking, turned to face her. "Is that what you want?" His amber eyes searched hers. "To go back to a family that put you in chains? That offered you up like a sacrifice to save your brother's skin?" Neve's throat tightened. She didn't know what she wanted. She'd never been asked. "It's what I know," she said finally. "It's all I know." "Then let me show you something different." He gestured down the corridor. 1 week. Stay 1 week as my guest. If after that you want to return to them, I won't stop you. But give me 7 days to prove that you deserve better than what they've given you." "Why do you care what I deserve?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Raven didn't flinch. "Because I felt something in that throne room," he said quietly. "The moment you walked in. Something I've been waiting 300 years to feel." Neve's heart stuttered. "What are you talking about?" "You know what I'm talking about." His gaze held hers, steady and certain. "Your wolf felt it too. I saw it in your eyes when I got close. The recognition. The pull. Mate." The word echoed through her mind again, insistent and undeniable. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Your mate would be you." His voice was firm. "My mate is you. Has always been you. I just had to wait until the world brought you to me." He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "I didn't expect it to happen like this. I didn't expect you to arrive in chains, offered as payment for someone else's crimes. But fate has a cruel sense of humor." Neve didn't know what to say. Her whole life, she'd been told she was worthless, a disappointment, a burden to be traded away at the first opportunity. And now the Lycan King was standing in front of her, telling her she was his fated mate. It felt like a dream, or a trap. "I don't believe in fate," she said. Neither did I, until about an hour ago. Raven started walking again, and after a moment, she followed. For what it's worth, I'm not going to force anything on you. The bond doesn't work that way, not for me. You're my mate, but that doesn't mean you owe me anything. It doesn't mean you have to stay or care or even acknowledge what's between us. Then what does it mean? It means I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. He glanced at her, and something vulnerable flickered in his expression. Whether you let me or not. They reached a set of ornate doors. Raven pushed them open to reveal a chamber that took Neve's breath away. The room was enormous, bigger than the entire floor of her family's house where she'd been relegated. A massive bed, draped in silver and deep blue. A fireplace already crackling with warmth. Windows that looked out over moonlit gardens. A bathing room visible through an archway, steam rising from water that had clearly been prepared in advance. "These are your rooms," Raven said, "for as long as you want them." Neve walked inside slowly, her fingers brushing the silk of the curtains, the soft wool of the rugs. Everything was beautiful. Everything was hers. "I don't understand," she said. "An hour ago I was in chains. Now you're giving me a palace?" "I'm giving you what you should have had all along. Safety, comfort, respect." Raven leaned against the doorframe, keeping his distance. The chains weren't justice. They were cruelty. Your family's cruelty. I won't add to it. "You don't know me. You don't know what I'm really like. What if I'm—" "What? What if you're cruel, selfish, unworthy of kindness?" He shook his head. "I've been alive for 3 centuries, Neve. I've learned to read people. And what I read in you isn't cruelty. It's survival. You've spent your whole life learning to be invisible, learning to endure, learning to expect nothing so you won't be disappointed." His voice softened. "That's not a flaw. That's a wound. And wounds can heal." Neve's eyes burned. She turned away, not wanting him to see. "Why are you being kind to me?" "Because someone should be." She heard him move closer, but he stopped several feet away. "And because I know what it's like to be used as a pawn in someone else's game." She turned back. "You're the king. Who would dare use you?" "Everyone, when I was young." His expression grew distant. "My father saw me as an extension of his legacy. My mother saw me as a bargaining chip to secure alliances. The nobles saw me as a stepping stone to power. For the first century of my life, I wasn't a person. I was a position, a title, a means to an end." What changed? "I took the throne." His smile was sharp. "And I made very sure that no one would ever treat me as less than a person again." He met her eyes. "I want to give you the same gift, Neve. The chance to be seen as yourself, not as your family's property, not as an apology for someone else's sins. Just you." Neve stared at him, this king who had removed her chains, who had rejected her as payment and demanded her family apologize to her instead, who was looking at her now like she was something precious. "I don't know who I am," she admitted. "Without my family's expectations, I don't know what's left." "Then we'll find out together." Raven straightened from the doorframe. "There are clothes in the wardrobe. Food will be brought shortly. The servants have been instructed to give you anything you need." He paused. "I'll leave you to rest. But Neve—" "Yes? I meant what I said. You're not here as a prisoner. You're not here as a payment. You're here because you deserve one place in the world where you don't have to earn the right to exist." His amber eyes held hers, warm and steady. "Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Neve stood alone in the beautiful room, surrounded by more comfort than she'd ever known. Her mind was spinning. Her heart was racing. She should be afraid. She should be looking for the trap, the catch, the inevitable cruelty hiding behind the kindness. But all she felt was something she hadn't experienced in years, something fragile and tentative and terrifying. Hope. She was afraid to trust it, afraid it would be snatched away like everything else. But for the first time in her life, she wanted to try. The nightmare found her on the third night. It was always the same. Her father's study. The day he'd told her the truth, that she'd been promised to a neighbouring alpha at birth, kept only until she was old enough to be traded. That her entire existence was a transaction waiting to be completed. "You're not a daughter," he'd said, his voice flat with disinterest. "You're an investment. Try not to depreciate." She'd been 12 years old. Neve woke gasping, her hands clutching the silk sheets like they could anchor her to reality. The fire had burned low, shadows pressed in from every corner, and for a moment she was back in her father's house, small and worthless and waiting to be sold. A knock at the door, soft, careful. "Neve?" Raven's voice. She should tell him she was fine, should maintain the walls she'd spent a lifetime building. "Come in," she heard herself say. The door opened. Raven stood in the threshold, wearing loose sleep clothes, his dark hair dishevelled. In the dim light, he looked less like a king and more like a man. Worried, uncertain, human. "I felt your fear," he said quietly. "Through the bond. Are you all right?" She wanted to lie. Wanted to say yes, everything's fine, go back to sleep. But the nightmare was still clawing at her chest, and she was so tired of carrying everything alone. "No," she whispered. "I'm not all right." Raven crossed the room, but stopped several feet from the bed, always giving her space, always letting her choose. "Do you want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to talk about, just old memories." "Memories of what?" Neve was quiet for a long moment. She'd never told anyone, never admitted the full scope of what her family had done to her, how completely they'd dehumanized her. But Raven was looking at her with those steady amber eyes, and she found herself speaking anyway. "I was promised to another alpha when I was born. A trade agreement, my father's daughter for territorial rights. I was never supposed to stay with my pack. I was just inventory, being stored until the buyer was ready." Raven's expression darkened. "What happened to the agreement?" "The alpha died when I was 15. Border dispute." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My father was furious, not because I was spared, but because he'd lost his investment. He'd spent 15 years housing me, feeding me, and now he had nothing to show for it. Neve dash dash. After that, I became the backup plan. Something to be offered whenever the family needed to buy their way out of trouble. My brother's gambling debts? Offer Neve. Trade negotiations going poorly. Offer Neve. Son murdered 3 of the king's wolves." Her voice cracked. "Offer Neve." The words hung in the air, ugly and true. Raven was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, with barely contained rage. "How many times?" "How many times what?" "How many times were you offered, traded, used as payment for someone else's failures?" Neve counted in her head. 6, 7, if you count the original arrangement. She shrugged, a gesture that felt like surrender. "I stopped hoping after the third time. It was easier that way. Easier to believe you were worthless? Easier to accept it. She met his eyes. When everyone tells you the same thing your whole life, that you're nothing, that you exist only to be traded, eventually you start to believe them. Eventually you stop fighting. Raven moved closer. He sat on the edge of her bed, close enough to touch, but not touching. His amber eyes blazed with something fierce. "They were wrong," he said. "Every single one of them. You are not worthless. You are not inventory. You are not an apology. You keep saying that, but you don't know." "I know enough." His hand reached out, hovering near her face. A question. "May I?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His palm cupped her cheek, achingly gentle. "I know that you walked into my throne room in chains and held your head high. I know that when I asked if you thought it was fair, you told me the truth, even though it could have cost you everything. I know that you've been treated as less than human your entire life, and somehow, you haven't become cruel yourself." Tears burned behind her eyes. "Raven, you are not what they made you." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You are so much more than they ever let you be, and I will spend every day proving that to you until you believe it yourself." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody. I'm nothing." "You're everything." His voice cracked on the word. "You're my mate. You're the person I've waited 3 centuries to find. And even if you weren't, even if the bond didn't exist, I would still look at you and see someone worth fighting for." Neve couldn't breathe, couldn't think. No one had ever said these things to her. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to trust, how to believe that kindness doesn't come with a price." "Then we'll learn together." Raven leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "I'm not going to rush you. I'm not going to demand anything you're not ready to give. I've waited 300 years for you, Neve. I can wait a little longer." She could feel his breath against her skin, could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. Her body swayed toward him without her permission, drawn by something deeper than thought. "Raven," she breathed, "I want to kiss you." His voice was rough, strained. "I've wanted to kiss you since the moment you looked at me and told me the truth instead of what I wanted to hear. But not like this. Not when you're still afraid. Not when you don't know yet whether you can trust me." "What if I want you to?" "Then you'll want it tomorrow too, and the day after that." He pressed his lips to her forehead instead, soft, reverent, asking nothing in return. "When I kiss you for the first time, I want you to know, truly know, that you're choosing it, that you're choosing me. Not because you feel obligated, not because you're grateful, but because you want to." Something broke open in her chest. A wall she'd built so carefully, stone by stone, over 23 years of being told she was worthless. "I'm falling for you," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "I know." His hand slid from her cheek to tangle in her hair, gentle and warm. "It terrifies me too. I've waited so long for this. For you. And I'm afraid of doing something wrong, of scaring you away, of proving that I'm just like everyone else who's hurt you." "You're not like them." "Then let me prove it. Not just with words, but with time." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Stay. Not because I'm asking, but because you want to. Let me show you what it feels like to be valued, to be chosen, to be loved. Loved." The word hit her like a physical blow. "You can't love me." You barely know me. I know your strength, your courage, your honesty. His amber eyes held hers, burning with conviction. I know the way you held your head high when everyone expected you to break. I know that you've survived things that would have destroyed most people. And you're still here, still fighting, still hoping even when hope is the hardest thing of all. He smiled, soft and sad and beautiful. That's enough to start. The rest we'll discover together. Neve stared at him, this king who knelt before her, this man who looked at her chains and felt rage instead of satisfaction, this person who wanted to kiss her but wouldn't, because he cared more about her readiness than his own desire. She was falling for him, falling fast and hard and terrified. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the landing. The reckoning came on the 7th day. Neve was in the garden when the summons arrived. A servant, breathless and wide-eyed, telling her the king requested her presence in the throne room. Something about her family, something about justice. Her heart stuttered. 7 days. She'd been given 7 days of safety, of kindness, of learning what it felt like to be treated as a person instead of property, and now it was ending. She walked through the castle corridors with her head high, just as she had that first night. But this time, she wasn't in chains. This time, she wasn't alone. The throne room was packed. Nobles lined the walls, their expressions ranging from curious to predatory. Guards stood at attention. And at the center of the hall, on their knees before the throne, knelt her father and brother. They looked terrible. A week of confinement had stripped away their arrogance, leaving behind something small and desperate. Her father's face was gaunt. Her brother's eyes were hollow. Neve felt nothing. She'd expected guilt or pity, or maybe even satisfaction. Instead, there was just emptiness. They'd stopped being her family a long time ago. Maybe they'd never been family at all. Raven sat on his throne, but his eyes found hers the moment she entered. Something softened in his expression, there and gone, too quick for anyone else to catch. Neve. His voice carried across the hall. Please, join us. She walked forward, stopping beside the throne rather than before it. A deliberate choice, a statement. Her father's head snapped up. Neve, thank the gods. Tell him this has gone on long enough. Tell him we've learned our lesson. Tell him, be silent. Rovin's voice cut through the plea like a blade. You'll speak when spoken to, and right now, I'm not speaking to you. He rose from his throne and descended the steps until he stood beside Neve. His hand found hers, warm, steady, grounding. I've spent the past week learning the truth about the Mercer Pack, Raven announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. About how they treated their daughter, about the 6 previous times she was offered as payment for debts she didn't owe, about the day her father told her, at 12 years old, that she was nothing but an investment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Neve felt the weight of 100 stares, but this time they didn't feel like judgment. They felt like witness. Alpha Mercer. Raven's attention turned to her father. You came to my court offering your daughter as an apology. You put her in chains. You expected me to use her and discard her, just as you've done her whole life. Her father's face had gone pale. Your Majesty, I told you then that I wouldn't accept her as payment, that your debt remained unpaid. Raven's smile was sharp as a knife. I also told you that before this was over you would apologize. Not to me. To her. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. That time has come. Raven stepped aside, leaving Neve standing alone before her kneeling family. Alpha Mercer, you will apologize to your daughter for every cruelty you've inflicted upon her, and you will mean it, or I will know. Her father's expression twisted, rage and fear and desperation warring for dominance. For a moment, Neve thought he would refuse, thought he would rather die than humble himself before the daughter he'd never valued. Then his shoulders slumped. Neve? The word came out strangled. I apologize. For what? Raven's voice was ice. Specifics, Alpha. She deserves specifics. Her father's jaw tightened. For promising you to another pack. For treating you as property. He stopped, swallowed. For telling you that you were nothing but an investment. And for offering you in chains, for expecting you to pay for your brother's crimes. His voice cracked. For never seeing you as my daughter. The words hung in the air. Neve waited to feel something, vindication maybe, or closure. Instead, she just felt tired. Is that all? She asked quietly. Her father looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. What? Is that all you have to say? After 23 years of treating me as less than human, is that the sum of your regret? He opened his mouth, closed it. For once in his life, Alpha Mercer had nothing to say. Neve turned to her brother. And you, Caden. 3 of the king's wolves are dead because of your drunken rage. You murdered them, and when the consequences came due, you let father offer me in your place. She held his gaze, steady and unblinking. Do you have anything to say? Her brother's face contorted. It wasn't my fault. They provoked me. They're dead. I was put in chains. Neve's voice was calm, controlled. One of us was punished. It wasn't you. Neve ... I don't want your apology. She cut him off, surprised by the steel in her own voice. I don't want anything from you, either of you. I spent my whole life waiting for you to see me as family, waiting for you to value me, waiting for you to choose me, just once, over your own interests. She looked at her father, at her brother, at the kneeling figures who had shaped her entire existence around their indifference. I'm done waiting. She turned her back on them, faced Raven instead. His amber eyes were blazing with something fierce. Pride, maybe, or love. You said I had a week to decide, she said, to figure out whether I wanted to go back to them or stay. I did. His voice was rough. Have you decided? I have. She stepped closer to him, close enough to touch, close enough to feel the heat of him radiating through the space between them. I choose to stay. Not because I feel obligated, not because I'm grateful. She reached up and touched his face, feeling his breath catch. Because I want to, because you looked at my chains and felt rage, because you gave me something no one else ever has. What's that? A choice. She rose on her toes, bringing her lips close to his. And I choose you, Raven. I choose this. I choose us. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was acclaiming, fierce and deep and absolutely certain. His hands tangled in her hair, his body pressed against hers. He kissed her like he'd been waiting 300 years for this exact moment and couldn't bear to wait another second. Neve kissed him back with everything she had, every moment of pain, every year of loneliness, every time she'd been treated as worthless. She poured it all into the kiss and felt it transform into something new, something bright, something that felt terrifyingly like love. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. The throne room had gone utterly silent. Mine, Raven growled against her lips. The word wasn't a command. It was a vow. You're mine, Neve, and I'm yours. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Yours? She agreed. Always. Forever. Yours. Behind her, she heard her father make a strangled sound. Her brother cursed under his breath. The assembled nobles erupted in whispers. She didn't care. For 23 years, she'd been property, an investment, an apology for other people's sins. Now she was something else entirely. She was chosen. She was wanted. She was loved. And nothing would ever make her feel worthless again. The mating ceremony was held 1 month later. Not because Raven wanted to wait, he'd made that abundantly clear in the weeks since the reckoning, but because Neve asked for time to learn who she was without her family's shadow, time to understand what she wanted rather than what was expected of her, time to fall in love properly instead of desperately. Raven gave her every moment she needed, and somewhere in that month, she fell completely. Now she stood in the castle's great hall, transformed by moonlight and 1,000 candles. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue, her choice, not what tradition dictated, and the mate mark already tingled at her throat from the private ceremony they'd shared at dawn. This gathering was for the kingdom. The marking had been just for them. Ready? Raven stood beside her, devastating in black, his amber eyes soft with love. I've been ready, she said. I just needed time to believe I deserved it. And now? She smiled, a real smile, the kind she'd learned to give freely over the past month. Now I know I do. The ceremony was simple. Ancient vows spoken before the assembled court. Promises exchanged that meant more than words could hold. I will choose you, Neve said, her voice carrying clear and strong. Every day, in every moment, when it's easy and when it's hard, I will choose you, Raven, because you taught me what it means to be chosen. I will see you, Raven answered, his voice rough with emotion. Not what you can give me, not what you can do for me. You. Just you. Always you. I will see you, Neve, because you are the most extraordinary thing I've ever found. When he kissed her to seal the vows, the hall erupted in cheers. Neve barely heard them. All she felt was his lips on hers, his arms around her, the bond between them blazing bright and eternal. That night, he was reverent with her, patient. He touched her like she was precious, worshipped her like she was sacred. And when they finally came together, Neve understood what it meant to be truly seen, to be wanted not for what she could provide, but for who she was. I love you, Raven breathed against her skin, the words falling like rain. I love you. I love you. I love you too. She pulled him closer, her hands tracing the planes of his back. I didn't know what love was supposed to feel like. I thought it was something you earned, something you had to deserve. And now? Now I know it's something you choose. She kissed him, soft and deep. And I choose to love you, Raven. Today, tomorrow, forever. He held her through the night, and for the first time in her life, Neve slept without fear of what morning would bring. 6 months later, the news arrived about her family. Neve was in the library, her favourite room in the castle, filled with books she could read whenever she wanted, when Raven found her with a scroll in his hand. You'll want to see this, he said, settling into the chair beside hers, She took the scroll and read, then read again, waiting for the feelings to come. Alpha Mercer's pack had collapsed. After the public humiliation at the king's court, his allies had abandoned him. His treaties had dissolved. The wolves who had served him, grudgingly, fearfully, had defected to neighbouring packs. He'd been stripped of his title, his territory, his power. Her brother Caden had been formally charged with the murder of the king's wolves. He'd fled rather than face justice, and was now a rogue, packless, hunted, alone. "How do you feel?" Raven asked quietly. Neve considered the question. A year ago, this news would have devastated her, would have made her feel guilty, responsible, like she should have done something to save them. Now, she felt only a distant sadness, not for what was, but for what could have been. "They brought it on themselves," she said finally. "Every choice they made led them here. I'm not responsible for their consequences." "No, you're not." Raven took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You're only responsible for your own choices, and you've chosen remarkably well." She laughed, a free, bright sound that still surprised her sometimes. "Have I?" "You chose to tell me the truth when a lie would have been safer. You chose to stay when you could have run. You chose to love when you could have stayed guarded." His amber eyes held hers, warm with pride. "You chose to become who you were meant to be, instead of what they tried to make you." Neve set the scroll aside. Her family's fate didn't matter anymore. What mattered was here. This room, this man, this life she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd survived. "I was offered to you as an apology," she said softly. "Did I ever tell you what I expected to happen?" "Tell me." "I expected to be used, discarded, forgotten." She met his eyes. "I expected to disappear into your household like I disappeared into my family. Just another invisible woman paying for someone else's sins. And instead? Instead, you saw me." Her voice cracked on the word. "You looked at my chains and felt rage. You demanded that they apologize to me. You gave me a choice when no one else ever had." She reached up and touched his face, marveling at how natural it felt now. How right. "You made me feel like I was worth something. And then you spent every day proving it until I believed it myself." Raven pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You were always worth something, Neve. I just helped you see it." "You did more than that." She pressed her forehead to his. "You gave me a home, a purpose, a future. You gave me myself." "You did that on your own?" "Maybe." She smiled against his lips. "But you made it possible. You made me believe it was allowed." He kissed her then, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, his amber eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you," he said, "more than I knew it was possible to love anyone, more than 3 centuries of loneliness prepared me for." "I love you too." She laughed, the joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my very long life telling you so." "Promise." Promise. She'd arrived at this castle in chains, offered as an apology, expected to be used and thrown away like she'd always been. Instead, she'd found a king who demanded the world apologize to her. Instead, she'd found love. Instead, she'd found herself. And she'd never apologize for that. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. More Lycan King romances are coming soon. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.